Raiders of the Lost Ark, classic action-packed adventure movie where Harrison Ford plays swashbuckling Indiana Jones, an archaeologist from the 1930s who goes on many death-defying adventures around the world to find old lost relics. Indy is approached by the US government to help stop the Nazis from getting their hands on the Ark of the Covenant in order to stop the evil regime from having ultimate supernatural power. Armed with his hat and bullwhip, Indy teams up with his ex-lover Marion, played by Karen Allen, in order to go on a dangerous and exciting mission to stop the forces of evil. So today we are going to explore the quintessential adventure movie by looking into 10 amazing facts about Raiders of the Lost Ark. Let's check it out. Number 10. Origins. Indiana Jones came from the extraordinary minds of two big filmmakers of that time. It came from George Lucas and his love for old matinee serials, and Steven Spielberg and his love of James Bond. Lucas first envisioned his story about a swashbuckling archaeologist going on fantastical and supernatural adventures in the early 70s, while he was also developing the story for his space opera, which would become Star Wars. Although Star Wars had come out and proved to be a big hit, Lucas never lost sight of that heroic archaeologist who searches through caves and snake pits in order to find rare relics. Lucas met up with his fellow filmmaker and friend Spielberg on a beach in Hawaii in 1977. At that stage, Spielberg was enjoying his own success with Jaws and Close Encounters, which he had just completed. Spielberg told Lucas that he had always wanted to direct a James Bond picture, to which Lucas told him about his own action star that he had in mind for making a movie about, and Spielberg was intrigued, and thus the road to Raiders of the Lost Ark had started. With Spielberg acting as director and George Lucas acting as producer. Number 9. Name change. One thing that stands out about Indy is his name, Indiana Jones. There is no name quite like it. It instantly stands out while also being timeless. And on top of that, there is just something about the name that screams adventure. However, Indiana Jones wasn't the original name intended for the character. George Lucas originally gave the character the name Indiana Smith. Yeah, Indiana Jones could have been called Indiana Smith. Luckily, Spielberg wasn't sold on the name. He found it too similar to the Western movie Nevada Smith, of which Lucas then suggested Jones, to which Spielberg agreed. Easy as that, case closed. Lucas got the name from his dog, who was also called Indiana, and Lucas's dog was also the inspiration for Chewie from Star Wars. So because of that dog, we have both Chewbacca and Indiana Jones. That's pretty impressive. I mean, how many dogs do you know that have inspired two classic legendary movie characters? Number 8. Drawing up Indy's look. So after Lucas discovered the concept of Indy, he now had to figure out the design of the character. Although Indy's look is iconic now, back then Lucas had to start from scratch. Lucas turned to illustrator Jim Steranenko for designing the swashbuckling hero, as well as the general look and feel of the movie. And the designs he delivered were pretty much on cue to what we would end up with. In fact, one of the illustrations featured Indy leaping from a horse to an army truck in the desert, which actually would make it into the movie. There are a few odd differences that stand out if you look closely. For example, Indy has a much bulkier and muscular physique. He has black hair, and he also seems to be doing a lot of smoking. Jeez, Indy, cut back on the cigarettes. The concept illustrations were influenced by several resources, such as a production still from 1937's The Mask of Zorro, Humphrey Bogart in The Treasure of Sierra Madre, and Pulp Fiction comic book covers, particularly those of Doc Savage. And thus the look of Indiana Jones became one of the most celebrated in movie history. Number 7. Original cast. So the big question, the most important question, was just who on earth could take on the hat and bullwhip of Indiana Jones? Who could have the charm and charisma of a romantic hero, but also have the rugged toughness and strength of an action hero? Well, the answer was simple. Tom Selleck, apparently. Yep, Indiana Jones with a tash. Spielberg and Lucas set up auditions for the leads Indy and Marion in North Hollywood. Spielberg had envisioned Harrison Ford as playing Jones, but Lucas was hesitant as Ford already starred in his previous movies American Graffiti and Star Wars. Selleck did a screen test, and Spielberg and Lucas were happy enough with what they saw, so they cast him. However, Selleck couldn't commit, as at that time he had just been cast in the action TV series Magnum P.I. There is also footage of actor Tim Matheson testing for the role. Matheson had previously made it big starring in the hit comedy Animal House, but he also wasn't cast. Peter Coyote said that he was also approached to star as Indiana Jones, but when he arrived for his audition, he tripped over a heap of equipment, which no doubt wasn't very swashbuckling, but Spielberg cast him as the character Keys in E.T. the Extraterrestrial instead. Lucas finally caved in and agreed with Spielberg to cast Harrison Ford in the role. And it paid off, as he doesn't just act like Indiana Jones, he became Indiana Jones and was perfect for the role. Actress Sean Young auditioned for the role of Marion Ravenwood, but Spielberg cast Karen Allen in the role as he was a fan of the actress after seeing her in Animal House. Also, Danny DeVito was originally cast as Salah, which he apparently was really excited about, but he had to drop out, so the part was recast with Welsh actor John Rhys Davies.
In retrospect of Raiders of the Lost Ark's early production, I just can't imagine anyone else but Harrison Ford in the role, and trying to imagine anyone else playing Indiana Jones just fills my head with so much nope.
Number 6. Filming location. Most of the on-location filming took place at Tanzania, and there are lots of stories about how pretty much all the cast and crew got really bad food poisoning while filming at the location. All except Steven Spielberg, who was living on canned food he brought with him from England. Supposedly in the scene where Indy shoots the swordsman, you can see that Indy looks really tired and fed up and just really sweaty. Apparently this wasn't acting, he was quite sick while filming that scene. And as you can see from this outtake, the sequence was meant to feature more of a fight between Indy and the swordsman. However, when it came time to filming, you can see Harrison Ford really wasn't feeling it. No doubt because he was really unwell. And his blasé, I can't be bothered with this attitude created the most iconic scene in the movie. The sets for the movie were built on Elstree Studios in England, a far cry from the desert and jungle scenery seen in Raiders. The soundstage where the Well of Souls was constructed and filmed is the same stage used for the typewriter room in the Overlook Hotel in The Shining. In fact, when that set was taken down, the Well of Souls was instantly put up. Spielberg said that although he doesn't have a problem with snakes, watching all the snakes being pulled out of buckets to be used for the Well of Souls set gave him nausea and made him feel like he wanted to vomit. Can't blame him, really. Number 5. Lost scenes. There are several scenes that were either shot or going to be shot for Raiders of the Lost Ark but didn't make it into the movie. The most infamous of the deleted scenes was a scene where the character Salah is captured by a Nazi soldier while Indy is digging for the Well of Souls. However, while filming that particular scene, actor John Rhys Davies was so sick with food poisoning, he soiled himself while that scene was being filmed, which led to the sequence to be cut entirely. There was also to be an action chase sequence involving mine carts. However, due to time and money, the scene was cut. However, it was recycled for the next movie, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. In fact, supposedly a lot of the action sequences for Temple of Doom were actually ones that were rejected for Raiders. One of the more fascinating deleted scenes is this one, where we see Indy clinging to the top of the submarine telescope. This scene probably would have explained the huge plot hole in the movie as to how on earth did Indy get in that submarine after all. Number 4. Ford's injury. Raiders of the Lost Ark would have been somewhat a hair-raising shoot, what with all the death-defying stunts that took place. However, filming one sequence did indeed take its toll on Harrison Ford. It was the scene where he was fighting the big bulky Nazi next to the flying wingcraft, where the two get into good old-fashioned fisticuffs. While filming this scene, Harrison Ford tore his anterior cruciate ligament in his knee.
Ouch! I'm telling ya, as someone who has suffered that injury, it is really painful.
Not for Harrison Ford though. He is so badass, all he did was bandage up his knee and get back to work, business as usual. Despite all the dangers associated with Raiders of the Lost Ark, it didn't stop a group of young fans in Mississippi to film a shot-by-shot remake of the movie. The fan film, which took 7 years to make, has become a pop cultural phenomenon in its own right. And thankfully no harm or injuries happened to these kids. Well, at least that we know of. Number 3. Action figures and other merchandise. Kenner released a toy lineup of action figures based on Indiana Jones. Kenner would have been the ideal choice to go with, as they were previously behind the Star Wars action figures, which were a sensational hit. However, the Raiders of the Lost Ark figures weren't quite as remembered or celebrated as much. This is probably down to the fact that, well, look at them. The lineup didn't exactly stand out or leap at you, or look particularly exciting. Atari also released a video game based on Raiders, and yep, going by the graphics, this is one where you really had to use your imagination. It's one of those games that also requires you to use 2 controllers, where you basically walk around Cairo collecting items in order to complete your mission. Yeah, this game never really took off. However, one thing that did take off was Marvel Comics, as the company published a 3-part comic book adaptation of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the comic is actually drawn quite well, even if Indy does have a yellow shirt. The comic also features the deleted scene of Indy on top of the submarine telescope, and I also love how it omits the melting Nazis. So it's a fairly decent adaptation that should be read by all curious fans. However, Marvel would actually continue the adventures of Indiana Jones, giving the readers brand new stories for young fans who just couldn't wait for the Temple of Doom to come out and needed more adventures. They are pretty much a must-read for all Indiana Jones fans, as they are now rare lost adventures.
Yep, Marvel did indeed have a really interesting career with Indiana Jones.
Number 2. Non-moving spiders and other interesting props. At the start of Raiders of the Lost Ark, we see Indy enter a cave, along with a guide called Stapedo, played by Alfred Molina, who by the way would go on to play Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man 2, where our characters walk through a spider's web, where Stapedo gets covered in tarantulas. Molina said that each spider was placed on his back by a handler who brought them on set, but Spielberg thought they looked too fake as they weren't moving, so the handler suggested putting a female spider on the terrified actor so all the other male spiders will fight for her, and sure enough that's what happened, and thus they were all moving and wiggling on the poor actor. Another interesting prop used for the movie was the Nazi submarine, which was actually on loan from another movie production, that being Das Boot, as the 2 movies were in production at the same time. Indeed, this submarine appeared in both Raiders of the Lost Ark and Das Boot. And then of course there was the infamous melting bad guys, something that gave many kids nightmares in the 80s. The effects were created by Industrial Light and Magic, and was achieved by using lifelike head models and melting them with heat. Apparently this scene originally earned Raiders an R rating, but somehow the filmmakers were able to get a PG rating by adding a layer of fire to the mix or something like that.
Yeah, look, I don't know how the rating system works.
Number 1. Legacy. Raiders of the Lost Ark was released in June 1981 and instantly found its way to the number 1 spot in the box office, and would go on to make nearly $340 million on an $18 million budget, making it a huge mega success. It became the highest grossing movie of that year, and was the highest grossing Paramount Pictures movie of that time. It also received critical praise, thanks to its fun sense of adventure, mixed in with state-of-the-art filmmaking. Thanks to George Lucas's imagination, Steven Spielberg's direction, Harrison Ford's acting, and John Williams' exciting and enchanting music, Indiana Jones became a cultural phenomenon, a template for other action-adventure movies that followed. There's now hardly a person above the age of 10 who doesn't know who Indiana Jones is, and his adventures continue to thrill, excite, and inspire people even to this day. Indiana Jones has become a movie legend, a modern hero from the past, an image of goodwill and adventure, and it all started all the way back in 1981 when Indy took off for his first adventure in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Underneath the action and toughness, Harrison Ford had a vulnerability about him. He could get hurt, bruised, physically and emotionally challenged. And I think that made him relatable. He is tough and strong, but also represents the everyman who's going on these amazing, fantastical adventures. And to me, that is why the appeal of Indiana Jones continues to this day. Anyway, I'm Minty, and this video belongs in a museum! See ya!